Action.
Time for a nap, bitch.
It's no secret that horror films thrive in the dark, and in this part 2 of our behind-the-scenes breakdown of Night Mommy, we'll be covering and focusing on our nighttime scenes. If you haven't seen part 1, where I went over the daytime setups, camera gear, and all the lighting, definitely check that out first. The link will be down in the description. So, full disclosure, this was the first time ever in my life shooting nighttime scenes for any project. And it shows. Now, are there still scenes that I think translated really well on camera and that I'm proud of? Yeah, of course there are. But if anything, this film gave me this burning desire to try and shoot a film that takes place entirely at night once again. And I'll elaborate more on why throughout this video. Now, night scenes can either read as like a white silver color or as blue, depending on the look that you're going for and what you think nighttime reads as. And neither is wrong. The director Jameson and I both prefer nighttime to be blue, so that's the aesthetic that we decided to lean into for this film. One of the biggest, if not the biggest takeaway from this film was probably that overlighting was a bigger issue than underlighting. And it comes from my fear of underexposing my Z-Cam. Reason being, the Z-Cam handles underexposure like a moldy sack of potatoes. It's trash. So I was compensating for this throughout this shoot, and you'll see exactly what I mean. So without further ado, let's jump into the process. The first shot we'll be going over is an easy one, which is this wide, high angle. That cuts to a medium wide of Braden getting out of bed. For the high angle, we use a ladder that had the camera ratchet strapped to the top of it, same exact one that we used for the daytime scenes, and the lens that we used was the 50mm anamorphic. Simple as that. For lighting, we had two aperture 600s coming in through the windows, and just like the daytime scenes, those are bouncing into the underside of our tent and into this room. They were more or less just to illuminate those windows in the background, so they pretty much did little as far as illuminating the room itself. Then for the talent, all we did was take an Amaran T4C, which is the 4-foot tube, and boomed it up and over top of the bed. For the medium wide of Braden getting out of bed, lighting stayed the exact same, and the only change to camera was moving it to a tripod by the bedside table. Now, like I said, super simple. And to me, this reads as nighttime. However, we have to talk about the two windows in the background. When it came to the daytime scenes, the aperture 600s back here worked great as far as helping us get that morning or midday sun look. However, when it came to the night scenes, they were entirely too bright. Throughout the film, in every night scene you see with these two windows, both 600s were at 1%. That both blew my mind and stressed me out. We were out of our resources and didn't have any other ways to cut the output. So pretty much the wrong light was just used in this situation, unfortunately. But, you live and you learn. How little light you actually need to replicate moonlight when your fixture is pointed straight at a window was one of the many, many big takeaways that I took away from this shoot. Now we're back to another high angle, and in the script this scene takes place on a different day, but we end up shooting this back to back. We then cut to a back and forth over the shoulder conversation between Braden and Jenna. For this high angle, camera didn't move from the previous shot we just broke down. Starting with a key light on our talent, we took an Amaran 100X with the lantern 90 and skirt attached, and had it out of frame on camera right. The lamp in frame here has the aperture B7C, of course, and the moonlight hitting the bed and filling most of the room is an aperture 300X with a half CTB, color temperature blue, gel clipped to the front of the reflector. The light was then bounced into a DIY Cove bounce on camera left. This is the light that's giving us this wrap of blue light on Jenna here, and is spilling onto the floor as well as the back wall. To prevent this blue moonlight from competing with our key light, especially on our talent, we took a 4x floppy and placed it over top of the Amaran 100X. The final light we used is a mystery light, meaning I have no idea what it was. But it was something small, like a Aperture MC Pro kind of size, and it was super clamped to the curtain rod right here, which is motivated by the lamp light in the background. As far as how this shot looks, or is supposed to look, that being a bedroom scene at night lit by warm bedside table lights, I think this scene is a total miss. So why am I showing it to you? Because I feel it's just as important to share your failures as much as it is your successes. Filmmaking is difficult, like very difficult, but that's part of what draws me to it. There's no finish line. It's an endless opportunity to learn, grow, and share your knowledge with others when it comes to this craft. And if you enjoy seeing all sides of the filmmaking process, not just the nice shiny bits, subscribe to the channel because that's what we're all about here. Overall, this scene and the finale scene are the two I struggled with the most to light. But by the same token, they're also the same two scenes I learned the most from in terms of how to light a night scene properly. As an example, this is a shot that we see coming up in the film, and it's closer to the look I was going for with these nighttime scenes, at least the bedroom scenes overall, minus the intensity of the window light, of course. Now we move on to a close-up of Brayden. On the channel, I have a video breaking this exact scene down in much greater detail, and if you're interested in seeing that, I'll have a link down in the description. For camera, I had the 50mm lens, and this is one of the few shots in the entire film where I use the fly cam, which, if you're not familiar, is a super ghetto easy rig. This moment in the film is supposed to feel panicked, so I wanted that handheld movement and feel, but I didn't want the shot to be shaky. This was actually pretty difficult to frame up because we were hitting our minimum focus point, which is pretty low on an anamorphic lens, and we had to cheat a little by pushing the lamp and nightstand back toward the back door. After that was resolved, our key light was, of course, an Aperture B7C, and it was set to its AC power mode, which essentially means it turns it to a normal light bulb. So when Brayden screws the light bulb in, it automatically turns on without us having to do so wirelessly. On camera left, we had a big old strip of Duvetine as a negative fill. To hold it in place, we just shut it into a closet door and clamped the other side to a door frame that wasn't in the shot. Why not gaff tape it, you ask? Well, because you'll rip paint off the walls. Our light in the background is an Amaran 100X with the Lantern 90 and skirt attached. It was then pushed back into the hallway as far as we can get it. Finally, the light filling the room, on Brayden's shoulders, and on the lampshade is coming from an Aperture 600D. This was outside, bouncing into the window off of a 3x floppy from underneath our tent. It's also worth noting, because I don't think we got behind the scenes of it, but both these windows had half CTB gels covering them from the outside. The one and only change I would make to this shot in particular would be the hallway light in the background. The motivation behind it was a hallway light, like a can light, but I ended up not liking that. Instead, I wish we had motivated like a floor level nightlight. I just think that would have translated a little better. Now we're in the living room with Brayden. We start with a medium close-up, cut to a different location for a few seconds, which we won't talk about, and then come back to another living room shot for a medium close-up. For camera, we changed it up a bit and used the 85mm lens. Reason being, I really like the compression of the 85, and it's a much cleaner lens when compared to the 50, especially when you're at lower apertures. And since the living room was pretty large, it gave me the flexibility and the space to walk backwards to get that medium close-up framing I was looking for. I was also on a shoulder rig for this entire scene.
Around, he starts to drift off. We want this to kind of be a long shot.
Okay.
Because we want to shock the audience with the next one.
Okay. So let's run through blocking in real time. I think there's a couple tweaks that I want to make with light, and then that'll take 5 minutes and we're ready to roll.
Okay, we'll get you to block. What is this thing?
That's part of a...
It's called a spigot.
Okay.
Okay.
Sir, you grab your
breathe.
bat. You'll just reach for the remote when you get into the scene.
Jamie, so what's the music?
Alright. Stand by, man.
I'm hanging on to it. I can't let go of it. It's just gonna go.
Which line?
20.
We're trying to get it up. No, there's something.
20.
Each flash different.
2.
It's the TV that.
That's a bigger
Diamond.
Yeah, I'm on patrol, turn the TV on.
Stand watching it, but actually, more than watching it, you're looking around the house.
Lock it. Lock it.
So come off set for a second. And get them on set. Alright, on action, just kind of move in there.
What is the M?
Go ahead and move to your spot. Yeah, so kind of look around the house, staying in your spot. Now you kind of want to think about the foyer. Maybe you should lock that door. Yeah, go check that out. Simple, straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the TV flicker, let's keep that off until I'm just gonna let you roll it. He gives it
When he turns it on?
give it a stage turn on. Yeah.
Bam! This is one of the more involved lighting setups, so we'll start with the light in the background. This was an Amaran 100X with the projector lens and one of these shutter/blind gobos inside of it. For the ambient moonlight in the room, we started with a giant DIY Cove bounce. We then took an Aperture 300X with a reflector and half CTB gel clipped to the front. It was then shot into the Cove in the direction toward camera on camera right. For Braden, before he turns the TV on, we have one more light on him, which is an Aperture 300D. It was raised up high on a stand and had a light dome and grid attached. Fun fact, I really don't like using softboxes and prefer to shoot light through large fabrics. So when I walked into this room, because we were shooting another scene, and I saw the softbox, I started joking with my gaffer and said, if I like it, I'll give you $5. I liked it. This was shot in the middle of the day, so to block sunlight from spilling in from the kitchen, we had 2 giant pieces of Duvetine and closed off the entryway with those. After Braden picks up the remote, he turns the TV on, and we see a little splash of light throughout the room. For this, we used an Amaran 100X with a reflector and bounced it into a full silk to keep it soft. This light, even at 1%, was a little too bright for what I was shooting for, so we simply took 2 pieces of gaff tape in the shape of an X and put it in the front of the reflector to cut the light. This is a very helpful and extremely easy technique you can use to bring down the intensity of your light. Just make sure you use it on small fixtures.
Yep.
Got it.
So just from here, we'll just come back in.
Finally, there's a little more than just the Cove giving our ambient moonlight. After Braden sits down, you can get a better sense of where this light is coming from. We had a tent over the back porch, which somehow, I don't know how, we don't have behind the scenes footage of, but underneath said tent was an array of 4 Amaran 200Xs on a double header. It's also the light you can see hitting the back of the couch once Braden sits down. For the most part, I'm happy with this image. The only change I would make here would be to have this blind pattern that's hitting the back wall coming in from the other direction and have it stretch across the entirety of that back wall. I vaguely remember discussing that change with my gaffer, but this was the last day of the shoot. We still had a lot to cover, so I'm sure we had to keep it as is just for scheduling purposes. That brings us into the attic for what I thought was a really fun and cool looking shot. The camera also cuts to Braden's point of view a couple times, but we'll just talk about his medium close-up for this breakdown. When I was reading through the script for the first time and came across this scene, my mind automatically went to Braden having like a traditional flashlight in his hand. But when I talked to the director, he said, no, I just envisioned him having like his phone and using the light on the back of that. This movie takes place in modern day. It's not like a period piece or anything like that. And that's what people would do in this day and age, so it made sense to me. It also made my life a hell of a lot easier when it comes to lighting because now I had an obvious source of motivation for the light on Braden's face. That being the backlight from the phone that he's holding. Before I go into the lighting solution, let's touch on the camera really quick. This is one of the few, if not the only scene, I think it's the only scene, that wasn't shot in anamorphic. The director wanted a very wide lens relatively close to the talent to give you that awkward, claustrophobic sort of feel. So I used the widest lens I had in my kit, which at this point in time is the 20mm lens.
Hey!
Cut, that's cool. That look good. I'll come in here and cool off for just a second.
Because I knew this shot would be cropped in quite a bit in post to fit the anamorphic aspect ratio, I composed both of these shots way wider than what you see in the final image. I also shot this scene wide open, which on this lens is f2.8, and that was because I wanted as much character in the lens flare as possible because it's pretty cool. To light Braden's face, we initially tried just the backlight of the phone, and it wasn't bright enough, even with like a completely white screen. Then we took an Aperture MC Pro at 1% and put it in front of the phone, and even then it was way too bright to be believable and it felt super fake. So what I did was take a small piece of 0.9 ND filtered gel, and I wrapped the light in said gel. This was a pretty heavy ND, so it cut a pretty significant amount of light. So we had to bump the MC Pro all the way up to 100%, and then it was perfect. Then with a small piece of gaff tape, we gaffed the back of the MC Pro to the front of the phone. We also had Braden tilt the phone back just enough to where we couldn't see the light that was on the front of the phone screen.
That's good. That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Oh gosh, that's great.
Oh, you hear the squirrels up top. Look up top. Follow them with your eyes and your head. Now you feel stupid. Is it good, Chris?
Yeah.
Cut.
Also, another fun fact, it was about 5,000 degrees in this attic, and we weren't in there for a short period of time. So after we got done shooting the scene, I was so hot and dehydrated. I promise you, I don't remember like the next 30 to 45 minutes of that day. I don't know.
Action.
Drink water. Anyways, I was really stoked about the way
And
this
there's
scene
squirrels
looked.
up above
So
you.
going back or looking
Squirrels
back,
up.
I
Look
honestly
up.
wouldn't change anything.
Oh, it's just squirrels on your roof. You feel so stupid. All right. Well, ding dong. You okay? Is that AC unit okay? Ding on your phone.
Now we have a series of night exterior shots with Braden and Casey. The beautiful thing about these exteriors is they were all lit the exact same way, with some minor tweaks here and there. This made running through shots with talent much faster, way more efficient, which is great because we had a lot to cover in a very short period of time. Plus, we had no choice but to wait until the sun went down, and where this was shot, it wouldn't be dark until like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, so nobody wants to be working until 5 in the morning. So let's start with this close-up of Casey, which cuts to another close-up. These particular shots, these two, were the 50mm lens shot wide open at f1.4. I wanted to shoot with the lens wide open to introduce some weird distortion and ghosting into the image. This was to help feed into how unhinged Casey as a character is, especially at this moment in the film. When I cranked this lens wide open, I literally looked at my first AC and said, good luck. But honestly, I wanted this shot to go in and out of focus just a touch to again add to her craziness. Our lighting foundation for all the front exteriors is as follows. The light hitting Casey is an aperture 600C with a reflector, and it's shooting through a 6x frame of full diffusion. We also had the light shooting through a tree to get this dappled light effect as she walks toward camera. In the background, we took an aperture 600D, also with a reflector, and straight up blasted it onto this person's house. Now, before you get on to me, our liaison told us that nobody was at the house at the time, so we never checked, but I believed her. Then in our second shot here, this light in the background is an aperture 300X with the lantern 90 attached. And this was motivated by the front porch lights, which, to be fair, were also on. And like I said, this is the same exact setup for all the exteriors in the front of the house with some minor tweaks here and there. I love the way this was shot in terms of the camera movement and lens choice. However, looking back, I wish I would have changed two of my lighting decisions. The first is our background light. Now, the original idea was to have it motivated by like a street light, but to me, it just doesn't look like that. I would have preferred it to be a warmer color temperature, say 3200 Kelvin, and maybe put a quarter silk in front of the 600 to cut the harshness just a touch. The second adjustment would have been to the porch light, our 300X. It was just too bright, and the intensity probably could have been cut in half. Now we have a series of shots that were lit and shot the exact same, that being the 50mm lens on a flycam, the 600C through a 6x frame of full diffusion, the 600D hitting the house across the street, and our 300X as the porch light with the lantern. I mentioned it in the daytime scene video, and I'll mention it again. This is why lighting spaces, not faces, gives you a huge time advantage. Because our setup remained the same for all these shots, we were able to move very quickly through this entire scene. Additionally, the director was able to work with the talent more to get exactly what he was looking for in terms of their performances. It's easy for us to get absorbed into making an image the best we possibly can, but we can't forget to give the director and the actors an ample amount of time to perform. I mean, after all, without a great performance, you don't have a great movie, regardless of how nice it may look. After Casey enters the scene with Braden and they begin to move back toward the front door, that's when we begin to make some slight changes. For camera, we swapped the 85mm lens, again, just because I wanted more compression in this image. You'll also notice that as this back and forth dialogue progresses between Braden and Casey, the camera slowly moves into a Dutch angle on Casey by the end of the scene. Dutch angles are one of my favorite ways to frame awkward or climactic moments in horror films in particular. It can help give your audience that feeling of discomfort. And once you begin to look for it, you'll notice this technique is used a lot in movies as well.
Hey! Listen. I'll walk you back to your house. I'm so sorry. It's okay. It's fine.
Now, the director and I talked extensively about this baseball bat swing. We both did some research prior to the shoot to figure out how to make this convincing and, of course, also safe. On set, we shot it from a couple different angles to try and hide the fact that Braden wasn't actually hit in the face with the baseball bat. We also tried this weird reverse thing where we would have really fast cuts in the edit to make it look like Braden was actually hit with the bat at full speed. Ultimately, that approach was terrible, and the best, most convincing angle that we had was simply from over Braden's shoulder, looking at Casey as she swung the bat. I thought this worked out really well, but tell me down in the comments below if you think it's convincing or if you don't. Our foundational lighting remained the same from the previous shot. However, for Casey, we added a negative fill on camera right. We also had 2 Grips Hollywood, a small flag, and a small mystery light, meaning I don't know what it was, on camera left and walked it in on Casey as she moved up the stairs at the same time as camera. Now we're on the side of the house with Casey starting with a wide and then cutting to 2 close-ups. For the wide, we took a 6x frame behind camera on camera right, and I believe we had an aperture 600 going through it. Could have been a 300, but I'm pretty sure it was a 6. For the background, an aperture 300x with a reflector was just shooting into these trees, which was motivated by moonlight. And inside the window Casey goes up to, I believe, had another aperture 300x with the lantern 90 attached at a pretty low intensity. For the first close-up, everything remained the same as the wide. And for the second close-up, the intensity to 300 inside was brought down quite a bit, which, side note, I absolutely love the shot from inside. And the actress who portrayed Casey is also a filmmaker, a very creative one at that. And this shot was actually her idea. Filmmaking as a whole is a very collaborative process, and I encourage you to be open to ideas when you're on set if you aren't already. You can come up with some really interesting things with people and things that you never would have thought of. And that brings us to the grand finale of the film, which outside of this first moment here, I simply don't like. And I'm not afraid to admit that it's my fault. So with that, of course, I'll go over how we shot this, but the primary emphasis will be on the mistakes and why the scene just simply doesn't come together.
And
Actually, can you pop in real quick so I get a focus mark?
let's see that beautiful face.
Okay, got it.
Should we hold her?
Wait, give me 10 seconds to get this mark.
Sure.
Kidding. 4 seconds.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is this supposed to be here?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's supposed to be there. I can't take it off. I'm sorry. It's part of the decor. We all good?
It's set.
Action. Nice. Cut. Action. Honey.
So for camera, I used the 50mm lens and had the camera on a shoulder rig. The original plan was to shoot this on the Flycam, but because it's a hot piece of garbage, it broke on me. I had a Ronin on set I could have used, but for one, breaking down the camera to fit on that thing would have taken an eternity. It wasn't worth the time. Additionally, by the time we started shooting this scene, we were already past when we thought we were going to wrap. And if I remember correctly, we were like 2 hours past. The second issue with using a Ronin at this point in the film is the fact that the camera movement wouldn't match the remainder of the film, in the slightest. So at the very least, to keep it consistent, there was no other choice than to either handhold the camera or to shoulder mount it, which was a little more stable. That issue aside, the larger issue is basically all the lighting. As Casey comes down this hallway, the lights are flickering on and off per the script, and we thought it was pretty cool, and for the most part, it was what we were shooting for, but the lights are definitely too bright, basically overall. Then when Casey gets into the bedroom, that's when everything really falls apart, in my opinion. Now, to be fair, the blocking was a little awkward in this room because we had this giant bed in the middle, and when Jenna wakes up, she's supposed to get out of bed, so it would have been weird for her to immediately go to the foot of the bed, or even on the opposite side of the bed to meet Casey at the door. So with that, she stayed on her side of the bed, and as a result, what we have to work with is a very flat background. She's right up against that wall. Now, what I was trying to go for was a soft, warm lamp as a key light on Jenna, and the remaining light would have been like an ambient fill of moonlight in the room. But because of the way we had to position her, the lamp was behind her, so her key actually ended up being an Aperture 300X with a lantern on the opposite side of the room. Then to add insult to injury, my worst nightmare came true, and everything was underexposed. By a lot. So I did the color grading for this film, and when I got to this scene, the image was absolutely being torn to shreds, regardless of what I tried to do to it. So there are a lot of things I would have changed with this scene. Basically everything, but even with all the mistakes, it was still pretty cool to have a sugar bottle on set to smash someone over the head with. So check that out.
That's back here.
Well, that's nice.
How's that?
Audio is rolling, correct? Yes. Okay, very good.
So,
Okay, and action.
Time for a nap, bitch. She was getting a little fussy.
Cut. Wow, Emily, did that hurt? That really sounded painful.
I know.
Okay. We're putting the glass shards in it.
Oh, that was really good.
That's great. I did film it. Did I not?
like I said, filmmaking is difficult, and there's an endless amount of ways that you can be creative to resolve challenges. They're not problems, they're challenges. So walking away from a film like this can be defeating, and for me in some cases it was. However, this film was also extremely rewarding. It was an ambitious project, to say the least, with a very tight schedule and no budget at all. But at the end of the day, we made a film, and it's super cliche, but that's truly what matters. So long as you learn from your mistakes and you enjoy the process, it's always worth it in the end, I promise. As always, thank you so much for spending just a little bit of time with me today, and I'll see you again very soon.
Okay. Has anyone seen my hat?